All right, we're back for episode 111 of Digital Divination, and Ron will begin with our traditional ritual of reading of the words of Watsley.
Reading words. Yes, and to be honest, having just re-upped my, annual corporate certification, I like always, I know I am doing the right thing by saying, "Hey everyone, I am an employee of Wizards of the Coast, but the opinions I express are mine and not theirs."
Namaste.
They have training to teach you how to say that?
No, it's the social
Oh,
media
yeah,
training
yeah,
that we
yeah,
do.
yeah. Cool.
And it's a lot of things that you might actually expect. I probably could have, without knowing what this was, I could have written it'd be like, don't badmouth other companies or the people at other companies, and express enthusiasm, but don't spoil stuff, and all the things you might expect.
Yeah.
But one of them is actually fairly specific. So when you're appearing in a stream or something like that, that's totally permissible, but you're not speaking on behalf of Wizards. So make sure people know, hey, one, you're a Wizards employee, but two, you're not speaking on Wizards' behalf, you're speaking on your own behalf.
That's great. That's good. And so it
So,
sounds like 'cause I remember you were a little concerned initially on about doing this, and now it sounds like it is okay thing. In fact, they're expecting people to do it, so making sure you do the right thing when you do it.
well, I think so. There's something really valuable about people who are excited about the industry, like expressing their excitement about the industry. And I'm very excited about this industry. So I think that sort of doing their best to sort of quench that is not good in the long
Yeah.
Yeah.
run. And I think letting people have their enthusiasm shine in ways that it isn't going to sort of impute trouble to the employer, it's actually really, really
Yeah.
wise. I remember, Paizo was very much the same as far as, yeah, very much encouraged to go on streams and do interviews and things like that. That was always very fun to do. So
Yeah, it's just sort of a similar thing to like sometimes you're going on the interview because you're about to talk about a product and you are talking in for the voice of Paizo, right? Like maybe you'll go
mm,
on a no direction and talk, preview about it. And that happens on company time usually anyway. So that's you are. But for stuff like this is my own personal opinions and the
Not
same,
Paizo's.
it's
Yeah.
not Paizo's. I don't feel like it's generally
Yeah.
been sort of, I guess, not really. There's not hasn't been any like thorniness around it, so that's why I haven't really said anything like that. But I think that's
Right. It's
should be
almost
clear.
understood because everybody at Paizo's like doing these kind of things anyway.
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
you're not signing off an annual attestation that you're going to say
Yeah.
that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, we were all chatting about this before we got started, and summer's here. It's a nice balmy 70 plus degrees in Seattle, which is short sleeve and short weather. I know it is not in a lot of other places, but here it's nice warm weather, and that also means convention season. And I'm getting excited for conventions, and I thought we could talk about um, what what excites you about going to conventions, either for work or for not for work, and then what are your favorite conventions?
Hmm.
That's good. I will take the first of those questions myself. One of the things that I've really enjoyed doing for conventions that I've been attending for, gosh, the last several decades, is I like playing a lot of different game systems that I otherwise don't get to play with my home group. And then I keep like a binder of, at the end of every convention, it's like, here's all the pre-generated characters I was given, and the sort of the quick start printout pages of stuff, and maybe even some handouts that I was given. And that's the case whether it's some game I've never played before, like Continuum, this time travel game that my group has never been interested in, or even if it's something like, the Paizo Organized Play or something like that, where it is a game I know well, but I sort of, keep the characters and kind of the handouts and stuff. It'd be kind of fun. And so every now and again, when I'm going through some of my old gaming boxes, I'll come across some year's folder for, oh, hey, here was I remember playing this weird detective game, and it turned out we were all aliens, but we didn't know it at the time, and stuff like that.
Well, that's at a
So
big convention, right? A really large one. You have those opportunities. You don't always have them
uh,
at smaller
even
ones.
that's
Yeah.
true. Even some of the
Yeah.
smaller ones, I feel like I'm not the only one who enjoys
Right.
going to conventions because it lets me play things that I
Yep.
don't get to play with my home group. And so you can have people at even some of the, the small Illinois conventions that I used to go to, downstate, would play games that I only ever heard of when I was there or something like
Mhm,
that.
mhm,
Uh, Most recently, I was at Gamehole
mhm.
Con in Madison, and there were a couple of games that I played that I'd never played before, which are not necessarily new games. Like Dragonbane
Yeah.
is a big Swedish RPG that I had never played before, but I got to play one shot there. It was a ton of fun. There's a horror game whose name I don't might have been Shiver. Um, that I hadn't even heard of, but was excited to be able to play. And that wasn't a super big con,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
big enough to have enough variety of games. I don't think I played the same game system twice the entire time I was
mhm,
there.
Hmm,
mhm,
it's pretty cool. In a similar vein, though, as to for the big cons, it is one of the things I've always liked is finding things like just when you cons that have big floors, like Gen Con.
right.
Going out there and just kind of like wandering around a little bit and
Yep.
just stumbling across something that you didn't even know existed, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, there was something a while back at Gen Con. I found something called Steak Land, which
Oh,
was
based on the movie.
um, I don't know if it was based on the movie.
Or the
Wait,
movie's
what?
based on
What
the
was it called?
game. That would be even
I
better.
don't think that's true either. Maybe it's
Okay.
not called Steakland. Now I'm not sure what
Oh,
it is, but it was this very stylized sort of like it was like someone was starting to do a game based on their comic book essentially, or
oh,
their
okay.
drawings, and it was
Yeah.
this very stylized. And the game didn't really exist at that point, but they were giving out patches and stuff like that. Um, but it was very cool, and I was like, "Oh, this looks pretty cool." I'm very excited to find out about more about it later. If it ever, I don't even think it ever came to Kickstarter, but it was something out there that was like that I would not have been able to find like kind of anywhere else because it didn't really have a big. You can't really just sort of troll the internet to find this kind of stuff. You kind of need to go
Right,
to some space
right,
specific and just kind of look around and hope you spot something that excites you or you know card game, board game, role playing game.
right.
Especially Gen Con, all those things.
Yeah, I think Jen
Well, let me ask
go
you,
ahead.
let me ask, was that specific, did you have a good time at that specific game?
I didn't play the game. This was just me wandering
You just
around
saw it.
booths and looking for stuff and then like, "Oh, that looks really
Oh, I
interesting.
see. I
I
see.
should buy that or I should check it out," and get something because that I think I did buy something. It was like a little bit of book of art with like some concepts and what's the word I'm looking for? Some lore stuff in there, like what this is. This is this is the kind of world that this is, and I'm like, oh, that's very intriguing to me. I didn't have a game attached to it yet, but I feel like I've found other. Well, there's the one game, uh, uh, Ron, that when we went to Shucks in like 2019, right? Up in Canada,
Hmm.
there was a game. I found a game there that I was like, this looks like a game that I was trying to make ages ago, and then for some reason, I never bought that. I didn't buy the game at the time. Joe found it for me like last year and sent me a copy. So I have it
Oh,
now.
which game was
It's
it?
called Spell, and it's the game you play with Scrabble tiles. Um,
Oh, wow.
Oh,
yes, and
okay.
I remember looking at the pickup. I'm like, I was trying to do this like years ago, and someone cracked the code maybe, and I thought, oh, this looks pretty cool. And then I didn't buy the book. Why? I know this is like something of very much of interest to me.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we also played a game, that I'd only ever played there, called Your Perfect Dream Neighborhood or something like that.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Um,
the roll and write one? No, that was the house one, house
yes,
building one.
yes, where you were putting house numbers on a
Yes. Right.
pad,
Yeah.
and I just had sort of a board game kind of meetup
Mhm.
thing at my house where I just had a bunch of people come on over and bring whatever games you want, and a couple of friends of mine brought that
Oh.
because it was kind of like their go-to game, and I'm like, wait, in the distant prehistory in my mind, I remember having played this once with
Yeah.
my friends Jason and Joe at a convention in Canada.
That was the one so I think we're talking about 2 different games. There's one that's sort of been out for a while. We did play that one, and then there was that remember that one where we
Hmm.
went to, like it was like 100 people were playing it at the same time, where you were building
Oh,
a
the
house?
mega
No, not the
games.
mega game.
We did two
Not
different.
exactly the mega game, but we'll talk about those in a second. Sorry. It was a different roll and write.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't 100 people, but it was like 20 or 40 people,
Oh,
but you were doing
I had totally
the
forgotten that till
architecture
now.
of the
Yeah.
house, right? Yeah.
And it was like
Yeah.
shapes you had to be able to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
match, and you could easily lock yourself out of being able to match them
This house is
all
all
because you didn't know what was
hallways, right?
coming.
Yeah, so like yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's the one I thought you
Yeah,
were
I'd
talking
forgotten
about.
all about that till
Yeah,
now.
that one I don't know if it ever that one was also like don't know if that ever came out. The house game you're thinking of is Welcome to, which I play all the time on Board Game Arena 'cause that's great. Um, Now
Yeah.
let's talk about mega games, which is also something you can kind of really only experience at cons or special events.
Mhm.
And that is the fact that it's a bunch of it's like what if Model UN was also a role playing game is one way to put it. And so you have these people come
Mhm.
in and you get like a role of some kind. Oh, you're the secretary of this country or whatever. The one that we helped run was the one based on the Scythe board game, right?
There were
Oh,
2
and there's the
that we
alien
did
one
when we
too.
were up
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, yep.
There's a third one which we didn't do, but I don't remember what that one was. But yeah, so they just did these things like maybe you're representatives of a fictional country. Maybe it's the real world, but aliens are attacking, or something like that. And then you get like dossiers, and you try to like get some goals. And every mega game has its own sort of mechanics. Like sometimes you're just like I'm trying to get cards and collect them and trade them, but most of it is just sort of like talking to other people and actually
Mhm.
playing a role in a big kind of not quite a LARP because you don't it doesn't get that involved,
Mhm.
but it is LARP esque. And you know we were going to do something with a mega game, but in 2020, and then 2020 happened.
Yeah, oh man, the 2020
Oh, it would have been
PaizoCon
so good.
mega game we were gonna do would have been totally awesome had there not been this, pandemic that had swept through. I had some experience my first experience really with something like that LARPing, like the mega game, I have to admit, was, gosh, back in 1990, right? When I graduated high school, in my high school Spanish class, we had to do, like, this final project,
Mm.
and my final project was sort of a really big how to host a murder
Mhm.
slash LARP kind of thing where every one of the 30 people in my Spanish class got a role in all in Spanish.
Mhm.
And it was about some I don't remember some sort of I don't know terrorist attack or something. Some subset of them their characters knew about it and the rest of everybody else had to figure it out and it only could happen in conversation and of course only in Spanish,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So it was sort of testing everybody on the Spanish thing. I got very good marks for that. But I think that might have been where my initial love of things like convention interactive and things like that, where a lot of people working towards similar goals and very occasionally cross purposes
Yeah.
is a thing you can only do with a big group of people like conventions bring together.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to both of you, the perspective, because you can tell you're both really excited about the design of these various systems and what it brings for the players and, how it's different from other things out there. You know, I that's a lot different than my perspective on conventions, and I haven't gone to a lot of gaming conventions until more recently, the last 10 years, and a lot of mine was going to small and medium-sized ones for organized play because I was working on
Mhm.
getting my
Mhm.
5, Novas, and you had to play a certain number of specials, which were at the time only at all these
Mhm.
various conventions. But I will say I really enjoy the large conventions, in part because there's a lot of people playtesting games that are new, and they're not even at a dedicated booth. They're like, you're having lunch, and there's somebody comes over to you and says, "Hey, I got this game. You want to try it out?" You
Yeah.
know, like Carlos Cabrera's daughter is developing a game, and she goes to these conventions and play tests it. And I think, man,
Just with people, that's
yeah, that's
Yeah.
like,
awesome.
oh, that's so cool. And now it's going to be published. It's like
Yeah.
so kind of interesting perspective like that. Um, so what you've been talking about, a lot of that revolves around larger game conventions. Uh, Ron, you talked about Game Hole Convention. We both recently went to Norwest which are both kind of medium sized conventions. You know, how are things different from your both of yours perspective with a medium size or maybe even a small convention?
The small conventions that I've participated in, and especially the couple of small conventions that I've organized, have all been around specifically around an organized play
Right.
campaign. Living Greyhawk back in the day. We had when I was on the administrative triad for the region that we were in with the Living Greyhawk game. One of the things that I got to do was to create one of the sort of the special interactive
Mm.
events, and I made this special interactive event kind not a sequel to, but sort of a parallel adventure to a series of 5 adventures that had recently come out in the campaign. So I'm like, oh, I've got an idea. Let's put this convention together where we kind of showcase is these 5 adventures, and everybody plays this one big interactive
Mhm.
event. That was, without going, into levels of detail I certainly could, like this mystical sort of, invisible highway that would go across the region in the sky, and how people were trying to use it to spy on people or use it for extra fast travel and stuff like that. And so all the different adventures were into this, about sort of the intrigue of it and the magical origins and so on. And the interactive was, somebody decided, let's just have a big race. And so the interactive was like a rally race around this, on this invisible, super magical highway way up in the sky. Super dangerous. It's like the dangerous place to have a race, but they're like, why not? Anyway, so having to deal with all of the shenanigans that come up with kind of I never played the rally adventure for Starfinder, but that same sort of, got to secure your own car
Yeah.
and realize there's some sabotage you got to
Yeah.
stop and things like that that are going on, uh, and that was the kind of thing that we did in order to put that small campaign together. We turns out that convention had a lot of people from all over the world, right? We had somebody come in from New
Wow.
Zealand for it, and then somebody come in from Scotland for it, because they're like, hey, this is really focused around a series of adventures I'm not otherwise going to be able to play, and kind of cap it all off with kind of a fun way to tie into it. So sure, that sounds like a great. And when I say small, I don't know that we had more than 40
Hmm.
people, maybe only 30 people at it. But I think it was a good time had by all.
Cool.
What about you, Jason? Perspectives on that?
I don't know if I have a lot of experience with the smaller and medium cons per se. I mean, I've been to a couple little ones, and it's always the reason why to go to the smaller cons is always to game.
Yeah.
It's there's going to the big cons and working them and getting the energy from that and looking around at other games and stuff like that. But the small cons are for gaming for me. So like there is con that I went to was going to pretty frequently as Board Game Geek Con.
Mhm.
And that was just for board games, and that also had a bit of a small dealer room, so there was some looking at and buying games. But for the most part, it was finding games and playing them, and just getting people to just try all sorts of games that we would not normally try because they have a library there, and that's pretty great.
Right.
Um, but I also remember, I don't know if I'd call this a con exactly, but it's con like. Every so often, when I was in New York City, all of my nerd friends would do a um, what do we call it? It was called GGG, the Gotham Gaming Guild, and we would just like because we all knew we had a forum and we would all talk about, oh, we're gonna do this. It would be just people running games, and we would rent out a space, in downtown somewhere, for a day or maybe even the whole like one day over the whole weekend. Let's say a couple hours. Eight, 6 or 7 hours Saturday, 6 or 7 hours Sunday, and then it would be big rooms basically filled with board. Not big, not huge, but like 6 tables playing different games, and everyone you'd sign up ahead of time, and this is the game you were playing for the whole thing. Maybe it was blocked in hours. It may have been like all day too, because it was like you could have a morning slot and an afternoon slot, and everyone was trying to like do these different things. Some people would be running board games, and some people were running one shots, and some people would run campaign like 2 or 3 adventures or whatever, in such a way that you could sign up for all of them, and just sort of go back and finish the whole thing. So yeah, I remember running a lot of stuff of that, and that was always fun trying to play and just sort of getting involved. But it was also, it was like mostly people that I already knew from the forums basically. But every once in a while, it would be kind of open a little bit. Not to the public exactly, because who would know? But it was, you had to pay to everyone had to pay to do it so we could pay for the room, because that stuff is expensive in New York City. But it was a good sort of like almost would say like the first kind of con that I'd actually ever been to, because it was just sort of the same vibe, right? As sort of like a lot of people in a room, and you kind of like gotta be a little loud,
Right. Right.
louder
Right.
than everybody else, or like at least so you focus in on the game that you're at while 5 other tables are going off and having their own good times.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of with Ron was saying actually, and Jason, as you're alluding to, that the smaller cons are about gaming, right? And yes, there's oftentimes there some people will bring in a different game or a new game to try out, but usually when I've gone, it's been for organized play because I was
Hmm.
in 2018 and 2019, I think the year before COVID, I went to like 15 conventions, all
Wow.
kinds of different sizes.
Wow.
Um, Part of it was because I wanted to go. I had to do 10 specials, so I was going to all these places that were running specials, and then I wanted to go to larger conventions and started having fun going to them. And I want to talk about one small convention in particular. I had a friend down in Sacramento who, I had met him at PaizoCon, and he invited me to go down to their con. I don't remember the name of it. It's tiny little con. It's in a big Air Force Base hangar that's been
Mm.
converted, where they do the
Wow.
con, and there'd be like 5 tables in there, between Starfinder and Pathfinder and stuff. And the first year I drove down there 17 hours straight
Wow.
to get down there and stayed, and it was so much fun because like every slot everybody played and you got to know everybody, and most people were local, and I was like the only person from out of the area, and it was really cool to kind of see how a different group did the same things that you would do like in your home group and how they organized and stuff. And I went there a couple times, and then the last time I went there, they got guest speakers from Paizo. It was Amanda and Rob were down there
Oh,
as guest
okay.
speakers.
Oh,
And they have the usual thing where they'll have a meet and greet and talk and everything and
Yeah.
ask. And so they had the scheduled time to do that, where the two of them were there and anybody could come in and talk and ask them questions and stuff. I was the only one that showed up. So I got an
oh,
hour of
Wow.
time to ask the two of them anything I wanted about
Wow.
Starfinder and Pathfinder, but mostly Starfinder stuff. That was kind of the emphasis.
right at the beginning of
Yeah, yeah.
Starfinder,
So it
right?
was like
So it
Yeah.
was
that
like,
was
tell me all about this
a
cool new
really cool
thing.
experience, to do that. So that's like a really cool small con experience.
It's fun. That's fun to hear you
Mhm.
describe that because you're sort of the plus one that helps tables, that helps make
Yeah.
tables. Going to a lot of these organized play conventions, especially back in the Living City day, but also Pathfinder Society, Starfinder Society. I would often go if it was
Mhm.
nearby where I lived with some group of
Right.
people, and if it was like me and five other people that kind of all knew each other, I'd have a decent enough time, but I'd spend at least some point looking around the con going, can play with you guys around my dining
Right.
room table.
Right.
Why are we spending, why do we pay to come
Hmm.
here? Um, but it was actually a lot more fun if you've got, one, two, maybe three other people. So you're like the small group, and every table you're at is just a couple of people you don't know.
Right.
And then the next table is a different couple of people you don't know. And maybe you see one of them again, and maybe you don't. And so being sort of a nucleus around which plus ones attached. And of course, a lot of times I'd, travel to go to one of these conventions and I'd be like, you just described the
Right.
plus one.
Right.
And so I'd sit down at a table and it would become pretty obvious, like, hey, those three guys all know
Right.
each other and game
Yeah.
together a
Right.
lot,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Um, and that's that kind of mixing and matching of the different sort of social circles in this very social hobby of ours was something I thought was really fun to
Yeah.
witness.
Definitely. It's always something like going to conventions and what I would do a while back for working for Paizo for like 2 or 3 years, going to Gen Con and just running kind of games to sort of showcase the game that we were
Mhm.
we were selling is also just like getting that feeling of like introducing people to something new and then getting dynamics of people who hadn't played, yeah, again, these two people know each other, they got tickets together, and these two people did this, and like, but then they're sort of groups coming together
Right.
and forming the sort of alchemy of a whole new connections and relationships is always just so exciting. I mean, that just sort of, and then running and then just like getting to see like how that group tackles, say, this scenario that I'm running over and over and over again. I'm running it 4 times over the course of Gen Con, and it never ends the same way, but some basically right.
Mhm.
It's just, I mean, that was always the thing that makes the conventions sort of so exciting, but also, I mean, also exhausting. But just the reason you go is just like do this and to get people
Yes.
excited about games and have people come up to you a year later, 2 years later, I'd be like, "Oh, I played that game that you
Yeah.
ran, and it was so much fun." And like, "Oh yeah, you still?" And they come back and like maybe the next year they sign up. It's not the same scenario, so they sign up for it again, but they just want to play that game or have you run that game for them.
Yeah.
Um, and whatever it is awesome. You get those little connections is people you only see at the con, right? You never see these
Right.
people anywhere else,
Right.
but you do, and you kind of have this sort of extended every year relationship with them in a lot of way
Yep.
for a short
Yep.
period of time.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
way to put it. An extended every
Yeah.
year relationship.
Maybe I
Yeah.
use the word annual instead of every
Annual.
year. That's a
Yeah.
more concise word.
That's right. An extended
Yeah.
annual
There you go.
relationship.
The
That's
Yeah.
old AER.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because like one of the things I used to run a lot of organized play locally, and then I did all these conventions. I don't do it as much now, but one of the things I always make a point to do is try to run the Starfinder special when it comes out at PaizoCon or now PaizoCon Online, and I get people at that convention, and I did Gen Con Online as well last year, and I'll do it off and on.
Mm.
And people that had played with me previously in the previous specials look for me, and I play with them again and say, "Oh yeah, you're the guy that's that pilot here out of Chicago. Where are you at now?" You know, because he's flying everywhere, and whenever he's in the hotel, he gets down and play. Or yeah, oh yeah, you're the couple from North Carolina. I remember how things, you know. So it's this the same thing, you know, that Jason talked about in person, but because it's online, they're more easily able to kind of connect with you on these
Mm.
things from all over the world, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the neat thing with that. Um, what has been your favorite convention? And you can either say in general or maybe a specific convention experience.
Selfishly, I basically like after maybe not after during the first time I went there as a as an employee, but PaizoCon has always been so much fun and so energizing to meet the people because it's people coming to the con just to talk about Paizo stuff, right?
Right.
And that is it's an ego boost when it's and that can be helpful every year when you're grinding out the books and stuff like that. It can really help. So I would have to say that I really miss the in-person Paizo cons. um Ron and Joe and I, we would do the puzzle hunt, and that would sort of this thing. People would come up to us in the middle, and you could just sit there. And granted, like a lot of times too, I would like a friend of mine from New York would come, and most of the time we would just like we would have be getting food together a lot, but and I wouldn't necessarily be wandering around and interacting with everybody all the time. So I would, him and I would just sort of sit and catch up too. But like you could sit out there and people can come up and talk to you and watch the other people playing board games on the weird tables in that hotel. Um, just everything about it was always good. And people who finding you like at the banquets when you're like, oh, please sit, people finding you to sit with you again that they sat with
Yeah.
you last year, and that's always sort of just makes you feel like almost like a celebrity, which is
mm,
something that appeals to
gamer
me.
famous. I'm not
Gamer famous.
You're not
Yeah,
famous, but you're gamer
fair enough.
famous.
Yeah,
So,
Paizo famous.
yeah. Well, a lot of my top convention experience Jason's been part of, right? I think that Shucks campaign, the Shucks convention we went to was one of my
Yeah, that
favorites as
was
far
fun.
as, great games, a good company, and it was just so much fun. And then PaizoCons, as you say, are always great. And it was neat to be attending PaizoCon as just an attendee who had kind of, I had stars in my eyes because of all these famous people I was meeting, and then be able to participate, wear the blue shirt with a golem on it as
Yeah.
a Paizo employee, and be one of the people who's, that people are, startlingly eager and surprised to
Yeah.
see. Um, one of my most notable, maybe one of my favorite conventions, so it has to be one of the Gen Cons I went to. We've been to Gen Con plenty of times, a dozen times, maybe more. And I would go, as I said, a lot of times in order to play games that I couldn't play with my friends at home, or wouldn't play with them. And I felt like at the end of one Gen Con, one very busy Gen Con, I realized how many people are giving their time to prepare unique and, fun adventures in sometimes some real niche systems, and how much I benefited from the hard work that so many of these people had had done. And so I decided, I want to say this was maybe 2016 or something like that. I decided what I called my own Gen Con give back, where I was going to go to Gen Con and I was going to not play in any game. I was going to run a game in every slot that was a different game in each slot. A
Wow.
couple of them overlapped with game
Okay.
systems, but it was an entirely different adventure for the game system. And as much as I find big crowds really energizing, and as much as I find conventions really energizing, a lot of people are really exhausted by the end of conventions or are kind of done seeing people. That's never been the case for me, except this once. That Gen Con was so exhausting for me by the end. I'm like, whoo, I really feel like I've worked hard. I have given back to Gen
There you go.
Con the way that I had hoped to. Um, and I still see some of the, looking back on it now, some of the adventures I put together for that, I still think are pretty darned clever, and some of them are, well, could have been better. And I had sort of fun experience with them, and every slot. I had one of them that didn't have enough people. It was just me and two other people, and so he canceled the event. But other than that, I had big groups and there's a lot of different stories to tell about all these individualized adventures I did. That was the only Gen Con I found super exhausting, but it's also super memorable for that very reason. It might be one of the ones I put near the top of
Mhm.
my favorite most memorable conventions list.
Yeah, now this is going to be a broken record because PaizoCon in person is probably my favorite. In part, especially now, I can imagine there's so many people I know that are in organized play and stuff like that all over the world. That's the one place that generally everybody would come. Some of them might go to Origin, some might go to Gen Con, some might go to South, but a lot of them would come, from Australia and UK to PaizoCon for because of this how specific it was. In my very first one I went there, I didn't really know many people there. And when it came to the banquet, I'd signed up. I wasn't sure I was going to go. It was a super long line. I was so tired because this is pre-transplant. I was all wore out, so I was sitting down, sitting down. Finally, like the tail end came in, was going in. I said, "Oh, I'm going to go and get something to eat." I go in there. I'm looking for an empty seat. I find one at this table way in the back. I sit down, and I'm like, "Wow, this is kind of cool. I don't know anybody here." Um, and so I'm chatting with the people next to me, and they say, "Oh, what are you interested in?" "No, I'm here. I love Starfinder. It's so awesome. Super excited. Starfinder just come out." And I happened to sit between Owen Casey Stevens and Alex Agunas,
Oh boy.
Oh my goodness,
and
such Starfinder
and
luminaries.
two people that
These are the stars in
had
my eyes for those guys. Like,
such
wow.
huge contributions to the Starfinder core book, and through that, and it was like, wow, I had no idea who they were, and it was like,
Yeah.
wow, this
Wow.
this is so that was like for my first experience as a new person and doing PaizoCon and everything. They were like so nice and gracious and answered all kinds of crazy questions for me, and that was just like the most memorable and fun thing. And overall, it was fun too.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, here's a funny story. Here's another funny con story.
Okay.
Um, so there, this is pre Paizo for me. Um, going to Gen Con like for a couple years, and there was a one Gen Con where we had something. I had something nominated at the Ennies, and we went, and it was it was during the time when Paizo would take every any category essentially, right? There was just like over and over and over again. It's like, oh, man, Paizo for this and this, and so we went. It was fun, Oh, okay. And then I think we went again the next year, and it was sort of the same thing. And then the year after that, we're like, oh, we don't need to go to the Ennies. We're not nominated for anything. Paizo's just going to take stuff. Let's just not go. We'll go drink or whatever. And so that was the year that the game that we had, Fortune's Fool, won the Judge's Choice Ennies, which I didn't know was a thing. And they should tell you that you're going to win one ahead of time,
So you can
so you
go
can
in
go
the
and
same
accept it. So we didn't know what was, and then
Yeah.
we're walking around. We're walking over one of those skyways between the convention center and one of the hotels, and we run into some friends of ours who are there, and they had heard. They were like, "Oh no, they were joking. Oh, you didn't go to the Ennies. Yeah, haha. Yeah, we didn't go to the Ennies. You won. They're like, oh, we didn't win it. What are you talking about? We weren't nominated for that. No, you won the Judge's Choice Award. I'm like, what? Why did they tell us that? Isaac's explained it to me. When that happens, for whatever reason, it was probably the end of a baseball game that was happening in the field that's sort of across the street from the convention center. Fireworks start going off. And so we're on the sky
Yeah.
bridge with fireworks sort of popping off
Yeah.
and eliminating the color, being told we'd won this kind of cool award. which I thought was kind of like, oh, that's oh, look at that, they're doing
Yeah.
fireworks for us, right? Yeah, that's probably for us because we won. Yeah, sure. No, you had to win. So we had to like go the next day to the booth and be like, yeah, we know we won an award apparently. So that was a lot of that was a
That's a great
unique
story.
encounter that will stick
Yeah.
in my brain for sure.
Oh boy, I have one of my most noteworthy convention stories is very much the opposite of
Oh
that,
no.
and it's a cautionary tale about hubris. The first PaizoCon that I'd been to, where I'd written something for Paizo as a freelancer, somebody caught my name and asked me to sign their book. It was the first time I'd been asked to sign a book for something, and it was made me feel quite
Hmm.
special. So the second PaizoCon that I went to, and it still as an attendee, the con hadn't even started yet. It was the night before, and we were down in the lobby there, and somebody's like, I'm talking with my friend Rhett, and somebody's like, "Excuse me, are you Ron Lundeen?" And I'm reaching into my pocket for the special sign-in stuff
Oh
pen that I
boy.
brought just in case. And I turn around, I'm like, "Yes, I am Ron Lundeen." And this guy's like, "Yeah, I'm from New York, and I know a couple guys want to beat the something out of you." I'm like, what? No, they don't. No, he was mad because I'd written an adventure that was hard,
Hmm.
and apparently the local judge had TPK'd him and three of his friends, and they're like, "I'm done with Paizo stuff forever because I can't believe they let this Ron Lundeen write an adventure that TPK'd us on." And this guy was just coming back after like 2 years. This was like he's like, I'm going to go back to PaizoCon. I'm going to give them another chance, even though that Ron Lundeen. And so who does he meet before the convention even starts? But that Ron Lundeen guy who's super smug about it. Anyway, don't don't let your hubris get the best of you, no matter what situation you're in at a convention. Is
Definitely.
my story.
Yeah,
Pretty good.
definitely.
All right. And are we all going to Gen Con this year?
I believe that I am. Yes,
Jason?
I
I'm going for work.
I'm not going to Gen Con this year. I
Okay. Oh, next
really
year.
want to
You're
go.
saying you're going to try to go
I
next
really
year.
want to go next year
Yeah, me
because
too. I
of
really want to go next year
reasons.
too. But
Well, hopefully we'll see each other then.
yes. Okay.
I have, yeah,
Well, we see each other now, so
sure, but it's been a bit since I've seen you in the living flesh, so
that's
we'll
true. This is
see each other.
That's true.
yeah.
And we've been just talking for like 37 minutes how special and unique the convention atmosphere can be.
Yeah,
It
So
is. The in
John.
person is a big thing. And one of the things I enjoyed, there was one year when I was doing all those conventions, I did PaizoCon, Origins, and Gen Con.
Hmm.
And I saw and played with like the same group of people and got to know them and hung out with them. And that was kind of a really cool thing to get to be part of this.
I mean, other players, organized play people, not Paizo
They
employees, but
were
like,
organized play folks, but turns out freelancers and things like that. Um, you know, so like Jessica Redekop and
Hmm.
Vanessa and other, they happened to be there. They were writers at the time, right? I guess Jess
mm,
still is, but very prominent now. They were just kind of starting,
Hmm.
meeting at different places and stuff, and then get to know them. And then SkullCon was another one. So I went to SkullCon that year, and a bunch of them were there again as well.
same
Yeah,
people
so
were
it's like,
there. Yeah.
wow,
Oh,
this is kind of neat. But because they're all Midwest people in that area, and it was easier for them to get to all those games.
Yeah.
You know,
I do miss that quite a
yeah,
bit. When I was living in the Midwest, it was my choice of cons just about any weekend of the
yeah.
summer. So I do miss the just the staggering
Right.
variety of different sizes and types of conventions you can get to just from a home base in Chicago,
Hmm.
into Indiana or Wisconsin or Minnesota or any of those places. So
We might have to do Game Storm down in Portland with Jason.
I've heard very good
Yeah,
things about Game Storm, but I haven't
GameStorm.
been. Have you been,
I have
Jason?
not been to GameStorm. I'll have to look into that
yeah. It's
maybe.
it's like
You're
it's like
closer.
Yeah, I'm
Norwest
way
Con
closer.
size. It's pretty
Hmm.
good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Noted. Is that didn't already happen this year? It's
I
right.
think it's March.
Oh, okay, then
It's
it's
early.
well,
It's like
still.
earlier than the others.
Yeah, yeah.
I seem to recall.
We can keep an eye on
Yeah,
it. That's one of the magic things about conventions is so many of them
yeah.
sort of hit their stride and just keep going year after year, and that's where you can
Mhm.
really work some of the really good contacts and friendships that you have.
Well, hey, it's great catching up and getting ready to kick off con season here, and
Yeah.
and maybe we'll see some of you this year at Gen Con, and maybe all of you next year at Gen Con. Who knows?
Come find us.
We'll see.
Yes. We'll give
I
it a shot. But
guess.
look for us look for us this year, next year at Gen Con.
Yeah,
Yes.
all of you look for John and Ron this year
Yes.
Gen Con. Tell them I sent you.
I'll be at the Starfinder 2 table.
Yeah.
I know a guy named Jason wants to beat the anyway.
One of these days, Ron, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
you.
I'm John.
And I'm
And I'm
Ron.
Jason, and this has been Digital Divination.